Assalamu alaikum. Surah al-Layl, the 92nd chapter of the Qur'an, builds upon the duality that characterizes the totality of Allah's creation in order to accordingly spotlight the dual nature of mankind's choices in life between faith and unbelief, right and wrong, good and evil, with regard to their personal beliefs, intentions and actions. The first half of this surah illustrates the differences between sincere believers in Allah and the last day, on the one hand, those who spend bounteously in Allah's cause and strive to avoid His displeasure and to gain His reward, and unbelievers, on the other hand, who are miserly and are indifferent about Allah and the last day. This part, meaning the first part, speaks to the fundamental human condition, to mankind's free choice between either dutifulness to Allah or the defiance of Allah. As it does so, it emphasizes man's responsibility for his choice, assuring that Allah will always facilitate for people the path that each one of them chooses for themselves. By night, when it covers, and day, when it becomes fully bright, and by the creation of male and female, your life efforts are so widely diverse. Thus, as for one who gives, acts with taqwa, and believes in that which is the very best, we shall qualify him for good, shall facilitate for him well-being and easefulness, and shall ease for him the way to the real ultimate good. But as for one who acts in a miserly manner and carries himself with indifference and reluctance, and gives no credence to that which is the very best, we shall facilitate for him vileness and depravity, and shall ease for him the way to dreadful hardship. How then will his wealth benefit him when he tumbles down? Oh, of no avail to him will his wealth be once he falls. The surah's outset, al-Layl, starts with the particle of oath, wa, that we call adatu qasam, particle of oath, which denotatively implies the meaning of I or we swear by, and which, as we have discussed in earlier videos, exposes and proves the inadequacy of any translation method that attempts to mimic Arabic on a word for word or near literal basis, failing thereby to provide for meanings that are explicitly understood by the native receivers of the text. What Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala swears by are two binary pairs of His creation: night at its fullest expansion against day at its brightest, and male versus female. Unlike in most other cases where they are mentioned together in the Qur'an, my conviction is that day and night here are not viewed as forming a harmonious and complementary duality. Rather, they are presented contrastively as being contrary opposites of a polarity. After starting off by drawing attention to the grandness of these creations, especially in the form of binary pairs, the content or the argument of the surah is structured around the notion of the divergence or bifurcation of people's chosen paths, which leads them to having polar opposites in faith and polar opposites in life efforts and the intentions behind those life efforts, a reality that brings them ultimately to polar opposites in their destinies. After starting with this oath, swearing by the dichotomy of day and night, and then by the dichotomy of male and female, there follows, in ayah number 4, the oath's subject that's being sworn about, which is the very nucleus of this whole surah. Inna sa'yakum lashatta, that your life efforts, O mankind, is shatta, is so diverse. Following this climactic statement and evolving from it is its elucidation through the rest of the surah. Here, to illuminate the diversity of people's ways in life, the two extremes of the picture are given in the form of two binary archetypes of people. This classification is introduced by the particle th, which serves what we call tafri', that is elucidating, exemplifying, or breaking down the statement that precedes it. I translate it as thus. Another point to clarify here, which is of crucial significance, is related to the Qur'anic use of the masculine pronoun in its different forms, which are abundant within the present surah. Although basically gender specific, masculine pronouns in Arabic, whether in the second or third persons, whether singular or plural, are typically generic within a gender neutral context, meaning unless their reference are specifically defined by context as being masculine, masculine pronouns commonly refer to people in general, inclusive of females along with males. And such is the case in the surah at hand, where singular male pronouns, which abound in the text, should be taken to be genderless. Next, as the orange markers of multiple denotations in my translation show, the phrase فَسَنُيَسِّرُهُ لِلْيُسْرَى is rendered in three parallel shapes simultaneously. We shall qualify him, that is a believer, for good, shall facilitate for him well-being and easefulness, and shall ease for him the way to the real ultimate good, that is in the Jannah, in the afterlife. In sharp contrast to this is the opposite archetype of the mean unbeliever, whom Allah promises فَسَنُيَسِّرُهُ لِلْعُسْرَى. The first one was فَسَنُيَسِّرُهُ لِلْيُسْرَى. This one فَسَنُيَسِّرُهُ لِلْعُسْرَى, which bears two parallel meanings again. We shall facilitate for him al-usra, that is the practice of vileness and depravity, and shall in this way ease for him the way to dreadful hardship, that is in hellfire. Finally, the grammatical tool ma in the last sentence, وَمَا يُغْنِي عَنْهُ مَالُهُ إِذَا تَرَدَّى, وَمَا يُغْنِي, has two functions at the same time, interrogation and negation. Thus, by using my orange separators of parallel denotations, this last sentence is shown rendered as a question followed by a negative statement, which go, how then shall his wealth benefit him when he tumbles down? And then, oh, of no avail to him will his wealth be once he falls. Surah al-Layl begins with an indefinite speaker who is swearing an oath, whom we recognize as generally observed in the Qur'an to be Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. His indefinite plural addressees, which appear in ayah number 4, are clearly recognizable from the context to be the whole of humankind. In the light of this, I translate the surah's outset on the basic language level of rendering as saying, O children of Adam, I swear to you by night when it covers, when it yawsha, when it covers. And by taking into consideration the fact that the lack of object for this transitive verb to cover signifies comprehensiveness, we understand that night in this ayah actually covers everything in darkness. When it covers everything in darkness. Next comes وَالنَّهَارِ إِذَا تَجَلَّى, and by day when it tajalla, when it becomes fully bright, bringing earth to resounding light. After swearing by this first binary pair comes the second binary pair for another oath. And I swear by the amazing creation of male and female. The modifier amazing is inserted in the light of the aggrandizement that is naturally intended for whatever is being sworn by, as we have explained. The oaths are thus succeeded by their common subject. I swear to you, O humankind, that inna sa'yakum lashatta, that your sa'i, your life efforts, are so widely diverse. Next, this general statement is elucidated through the classification of people into two opposite archetypes, the good versus the bad. Earlier, we did spotlight a conventional stylistic technique that is very common in the Qur'an, whereby opposite images or concepts are closely juxtaposed, side by side or face to face, for the sake of creating stark contrast. And this is exactly what we have in the present case. The first of the two opposite archetypes of people that we are told about is that of believers. Thus, as for one who, meaning for any one of you people, who a'ta, who gives, which is a transitive verb, but without an object. This implies two things. First, it limits the verb in sense to the giving of ata or u'tiya, meaning benefactions, the giving of benefactions. And second, it suggests comprehensiveness and may hence be understood to say that the benefactions given are of every kind. Man a'ta, benefactions of every kind. And while doing so, the second attribute of this archetypal believer after a'ta is wattaqa, is that he acts with taqwa. The literal, context-free meaning of the verb ittaqa yattaqi, context-free, is to avoid in fear or caution. It is obviously a transitive verb. In Islamic terminology, it means to do actions and abstain from other actions for the sake of avoiding, notice, avoiding Allah's displeasure and His punishment. I therefore add to my language-based rendering of this verb the connotation which is interpretive of taqwa, and so in reverential fear and awe of me he exerts himself to avoid my displeasure and punishment. The vast majority of translators render this verb into a verb to be plus an adjective, such as for him who is pious, is righteous, is conscious of Allah, is mindful of Allah, or is dutiful towards Allah. A few translators, other translators, have resorted to renderings with the verb to have plus a noun, such as he who has fear or has taqwa has, while a few others translate the verb ittaqa into fears Allah. Yet all of these renderings are actually defective, terribly defective, for they deal with the verb as a stative verb, stative, descriptive of a fixed state or condition, whereas the verb ittaqa is a dynamic verb that describes an action, not a state. It strongly indicates both will and effort, illustrating a sincere endeavor towards a sublime transcendental goal through action and abstention. And after describing this archetypal believer as giving and as acting with taqwa, the surah next tells us that he صدق بالحسنى, that he, concomitantly with his thus practicing good deeds and avoiding bad deeds, believes unequivocally in that which is the very best. For anyone of this type of people, the surah proceeds, he definitely deserves the best from us. For his doing all this, he definitely deserves the best from us. Therefore we, in our all glorious majesty, because of Allah's referring to himself with the plural pronoun, the so-called royal we, which is meant to add an air of exceptional grandeur to the context. So we shall take care to نُيَسِّرُهُ لِلْيُسْرَى, to qualify him for the practice of more and more acts of good, shall facilitate for him well-being and easefulness, and shall thereby ease for him the way to the real ultimate good. Right after this comes the second of the two opposite archetypes that the surah classifies people into. وَأَمَّا مَنْ بَخِلَ وَاسْتَغْنَى وَكَذَّبَ بِالْحُسْنَى. But as for any one of you who acts in a miserly manner, بَخِلَ. Again, it is not who is stingy, miserly, niggardly, as the vast majority of translators have rendered it. Because the phrase is not a nominal phrase, jumla ismiya. It's not descriptive of a person with the fixed state of bukhl, of stinginess. Rather, it says, وَأَمَّا مَنْ بَخِلَ. This is a verbal phrase with a dynamic verb, بَخِلَ, at its core, descriptive of this person in action, acting with meanness and stinginess. So it's someone who acts in a miserly manner, that's one, and carries himself with brash indifference and arrogant reluctance, meaning to seek Allah's pleasure and reward, in brazen irreverence towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and he therefore gives no credence to that which is the very best, meaning he has no faith in right beliefs and good deeds, and to their reward in an everlasting life to come after death. This is why he definitely deserves no gracious treatment from us in either his earthly life or the afterlife. Rather, we, in our all-glorious majesty, shall facilitate for him the practice of more and more acts of vileness and depravity, and shall thereby ease for him the way to dreadful hardship. And there comes the concluding question: how then will his wealth benefit him when he tumbles down? A question that on its own incorporates a definitive statement. Oh, of no avail to him indeed will his wealth prove to be once he falls, that is, into the grave or into hellfire. O children of my prophet and dutiful slave Adam, I, Allah, the one and only Lord, Creator, Nurturer, Sovereign Owner and Subjugator of all that has ever existed or may ever exist, swear to you by night when it covers everything in darkness, and by day when it becomes fully bright, bringing earth to resounding light. And I swear by the amazing creation of male and female. I swear to you, O humankind, by these great dualities of my creation, which stand as clear signs of my unique absolute oneness, that your life efforts are so widely diverse in their motives, goals, shapes and scopes, ranging generally between either belief or unbelief, either grateful dutifulness to me or willful defiance of me, either seeking my pleasure and reward or seeking worldly pleasure and advantage. Thus, as for any one of you who, for my sake and in my cause alone, freely gives benefactions of every kind from the best that I have bestowed upon him, and while doing so acts with taqwa, and so in reverential fear and awe of me he exerts himself to avoid my displeasure and punishment by devotedly and contentedly submitting himself to me in well-being and adversity as the one and only Supreme Lord, and by dutifully and consistently worshipping me with all his heart, mind and soul as the one and only Deity, without any intermediaries of any kind between him and me, and by thus diligently following my guidance, observing what I have ordered, doing relentless good in my cause alone, staying away from what I have forbidden, and sacrificing for the purpose of attaining my pleasure and reward. And concomitantly with his thus practicing good deeds and avoiding bad deeds, believes unequivocally in that which is the very best of beliefs, on top of which is the creed of Tawheed, of belief in my absolute oneness, in my divinity and lordship, in my names and attributes, and in my rule, as well as belief in all the other pillars of faith. And the very best of utterances, on top of which is the testimony that there is no right deity except Allah. And the very best of deeds, on top of which are the 5 pillars of Islam. And of the very best of the divine rewards promised for such and the Jannah of unblemished bliss. He definitely and with absolute fairness deserves the best from us in both his earthly life and the afterlife. Therefore, we, Allah, the one and only Lord, Creator, Nurturer, Sovereign Owner, and full controller of all existence, in our divine oneness, in our eternal, all-glorious majesty, shall take care to qualify him in his earthly life for the practice of more and more acts of good that keep him in good favour with us, shall facilitate for him well-being in a life that is blessed with peace, satisfaction and easefulness, and shall thereby ease for him the way to the Jannah of real ultimate good. But as for any one of you who, in adoration of the flawed gains of the brief and lowly earthly life, acts selfishly and in a miserly manner when dealing with what we, for the fair purpose of testing him, have entrusted him with of worldly goods, and carries himself with brash indifference to his duty towards us, who have created him from nothing, benevolently nurtured him, and bestowed upon him everything that he enjoys, and with arrogant reluctance to seek our pleasure and reward, and gives no credence to that which is the very best of beliefs and deeds, and to our reward for such in an everlasting life to come after death, he definitely deserves no gracious treatment from us in neither his earthly life or the afterlife. Rather, we, in our divine oneness, in our eternal, all-glorious majesty, shall facilitate for him the continued, willful practice of more and more acts of vileness and depravity, which will keep him ever estranged from us, and shall thereby ease for him the way to an afterlife of dreadful hardship in hellfire. How then will his wealth, with which he is so stingy, and for the sake of which he wastes every opportunity to save himself, benefit him, when, in requital for his willful choice to defy us with unbelief, vileness and depravity, he tumbles down into the depths of hellfire? Oh, of no avail to him indeed will his wealth, which always gave him false assurance and filled him with heartless pride, prove to be once he falls into the pit of the grave.